Well, it's Friday again, and it's been a pretty slack week in many ways. Not much stuff worth videoing. So I knew this was going to be the case, so yesterday I prepared the following. Well, next crop is in, and they're doing preparation over there with a hand tractor to prepare another rice paddy. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drain the pressure accumulator, and there's not much else going on, so I'll tell you a story about my work life. If you want to see what they get up to with these things in Thailand, put rice tractor racing into your search on YouTube. Badman. Back in the mid-80s, like it would have been 85 or 86, I think, maybe as late as 87. But anyway, there's well, at the time there was a Queen's birthday one weekend in June, always on a Monday. It was Queen's birthday was celebrated. Anyway, that particular year I'd arranged to have the Friday off to make a 4-day weekend, and I was going to drive up country with my aunt to visit my parents for the weekend. And got to Thursday, and I left my office for some reason or other, went out and thought, oh, smell of sewage, this is not good. Now in the building I was in, the toilets were prone to getting blockages, and things would back up and things would get a bit smelly. So I thought, okay, well, I'm sure the site plumber's on the job, so I'll just wander off and do what my boss referred to as management by walking around, which involved going off to a different building and just walking the corridors, and people would see me go past and say, Bruce, while you're here, can you fix this for me? So I'd go out and do a lot of user support, fixing little things that they didn't think worth calling about, but nevertheless made their lives easier. So I went off and did my management by walking around for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and came back to my office, and on the way there, smell's still there. Yeah, I'll put up with it. So I was sitting in my office doing some work, and I needed a printout of something. So I went to the printer room, which was a room sharing a glass wall with the computer room. It was on the south side of the computer room, which is on the northeast corner of the building, on the ground level, and it shared the underfloor cooling. So on the north wall of this big computer room there was a big levered air conditioner that pulled the air in at the top through filter boxes and pushed it out onto the floor, and it came up through floor registers to cool the rooms. When I went into the printer room, the smell was much stronger. This is not good, because I knew that outside the north wall of the building there was a septic tank for the toilets in that building, and this had 2 electric pumps on it, controlled by depth sensors. And this was actually a chemical company with multiple chemical plants on site and their own wastewater treatment plant. So what would happen is the electric pumps, when triggered, would pump the excess effluent down to the site wastewater treatment plant. So I thought, this is not good. So I went and got a floor sucker to lift a floor tile, and went to the tile beside the big levered air conditioner and lifted a tile. And I thought, this is really not good, because there was water flowing across the floor. Now, this was a purpose-built computer room, which normally have a raised floor for wiring and access underneath. And in this case, the floor was coplanar with the floor for the rest of the building. So there was a pit under it about 40 centimetres deep, something like that. So there was water flowing in this. This was really bad. So I went and lifted a tile in the printer room, which was at the opposite end of the shared underfloor area, and there was water pooling there. And I thought, this is really, really not good, because I knew that on the floor of the pit, between those 2 points, there was a whole lot of 240 volt powered equipment, like line drivers for getting serial lines down to the chemical plants, which were some distance away. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to shut things down to make this safe. So the first thing I did was I shut down the computer in the room, which at the time was only a VAX 780. That's why I know what time frame it was, because that computer was replaced in 1988. Anyway, so I shut down the computer, and having sort of sent out a reply all saying, I'm shutting it down. And then once that was down, I then threw the breakers for the power in the room. And I thought, okay, what do I do now? Okay, so I went off and I found the site engineer, and he came down and had a look. I said, oh, okay, I'll see what I can do about this. And he went and checked the pumps, and I found that one had a burnt out motor and the other one had a seized stator, so neither of these 2 pumps was working. And this is why you don't trust double redundant systems unless there is being checks done on the systems, because one can fail, nobody notices, everything's good, it's all being done by the second system. But when the second one fails as well without the first one being noticed, trouble. So anyway, he went and found another useful person on site, Reg, who rounded up the little firefighting appliance, which was a little petrol-powered pump on a trailer. And they brought that up and parked that outside the back door of the computer room, which had an outside door at the north end of the room beside the air conditioner. And they got that pump set up, and they were pumping surplus effluent across the road to another one of these pits which serviced the main building. And its pumps were working, so it was pumping the surplus effluent down to the wastewater treatment plant all as well. So there's a bunch of guys standing outside the north door of the building chatting over the roar of the pump. And I should tell my boss, who actually worked in the main building. So I called him up and said, Max, you're not going to believe this. And anyway, he found it hard to believe. So he said, I'll come and have a look. So he came down from the north to the north side of the building and said hello to the guys chatting over the noise of the pump, stepped inside the back door of the computer room and properly turned green and did an about face and stepped out again, because it was potent. The surplus water from the septic tank was coming back up through a floor drain, and that was right underneath where the air conditioner was blowing the air down on top of it. So it was picking up all the volatile gases and distributing them really well. So eventually I shut off the air conditioner as well, although its power wasn't going to be affected, but the computer wasn't running, no point burning the electricity. So anyway, I pointed out to Max that I actually had already arranged to have the next day off. I was going to be leaving it for him to sort out, and he said, yeah, okay, I'll handle it, don't you worry about it. So anyway, next day on the Friday, I was waiting for my aunt to turn up so we could drive up the country. And so I called up Max and said, so what's the story? He said, well, he spoke to our computer vendor who provided our hardware maintenance, and they said, yeah, no worries, you can even steam clean it, it'll still be covered under the support agreement you've got. But the story's gone around their company offices and nobody wants the engineer to come out and have a look at it. Yeah, fair enough. And he said, I've got to call into the cleaners to see about having somebody come and clean up. And anyway, you go and enjoy your weekend. So, okay. So I went away for the weekend thinking all through the weekend, I bet you that mess is still going to be there when I come back in on Tuesday. And so I spent the weekend halfway between laughter and tears thinking, oh God, what a silly thing to have happen, and oh my God, what a mess to clean up. So anyway, I got back in on Tuesday, and sure enough, the computer was still off, and about 10% of the floor tiles were up in the room, and the smell had dissipated a lot. It reached the point of just smelling of swamp, which was a big plus. So eventually Max turns up and says, yeah, well, I spoke to the cleaners. They said they could come in on Saturday or Wednesday. This was Tuesday. Now, Max lived 90 kilometres away, so he wasn't going to make the effort to come in on Saturday. He wasn't that dedicated. So he said, well, we do have the option of cleaning it up ourselves. So I said, well, for the record, no, so I'll never be requested to do this again, but okay, let's get on with it. So he went down to the site engineering stores and got a nice pair of steel toe cap rubber boots and mop and bucket and gloves and respirator mask to take out the organic gases and all that, and went back and set up some room dividers so that we wouldn't have casual tourists come past sort of laughing at us bailing out this swamp. And that was actually a big mistake. We should have had somebody taking photos to prove how far and above and beyond the call of duty we were prepared to go. So anyway, we spent about 2 hours with mop and bucket sort of bailing out this pool at the printer room end of the computer room, because it all flowed down to there, but as it turned out, it sort of did a zigzag and successfully skirted all of the equipment on the floor of the pit. We got so lucky with that. And so after about 2 hours of bailing, we got it all mopped up as best we could, at which point I went and turned on the air conditioner to start dehumidifying, and the mosquitoes were starting to gather because of the swamp aromas. So we went into the jet's toilet and found some of those nice mints they put in the urinal and chucked those under the floor to deal with the mosquitoes. And the site plumber came along and said, yeah, well, that was built wrong, wasn't it? The underfloor drain was supposed to go to the stormwater, and instead it had been plumbed to the septic tank, and there was no non-return valve on it. So, great. So they fixed up the pumps, and the plumber rejigged the condensate outfall from the air conditioner so that it actually came out through a copper pipe about 60 centimetres above the ground, and he dug down to the pipe lower down and broke it in and filled it full of concrete so we wouldn't get the backflow again. So that was fun. But anyway, our regular field service engineer eventually turned up, and by that stage I'd created about 2 pages of humorous captions for the photos we did not have. And George turned up and he had a better one. He said, well, if the level had got a bit higher, the shit would have really hit the fans. Yes, George. Yeah, so that was the great septic tank overflow incident of 1980 something. And the lesson I took from that was, don't trust double redundant systems unless somebody is checking them. There you go, it's now recorded for posterity. That story will never be lost. And we started up the backs again that afternoon, and it was all good. It ran for a few more years until we replaced it in 1988. And those papayas are certainly plumping up. Well, that's all drained and locked up again. Back to the lounge room. Max was a challenging guy to work with. Our views on things were so diametrically opposed normally that when we had a discussion and ended up agreeing on something, we knew it had to be right, otherwise we couldn't possibly agree on it. But anyway, we were having one of our discussions one day talking about electronic mail. This was about 1987. Electronic mail was not generally available at that time, but on the OpenVMS operating system there was a mail function. So Max and I were talking about this, saying, well, I wonder if we can get this adopted on this site, and what it would take. And while we were having this discussion, the site manufacturing director rang up and said, what would it take to get electronic mail from my top level supervisors? And Max and I looked at one another and said, then we got a deal for you. So we ended up buying terminals and running more lines out to the plants for the plant supervisors, which involved installing a serial terminal switch in the computer room, which could handle lots of lines going out through multiplexes to little boxes in the plants where they could hook up terminals and printers. So it wasn't long before his top 20 people had electronic mail. Some of them were a bit reluctant about using keyboards, so he had an easy answer for that. He said, I'll send out notices of meetings via email. If you don't show up, you'll be in my bad books. Okay. So then we started getting requests from some of these plant supervisors and these other underlings saying, can I get this from my team? Can we get more terminals and so forth? So it spread out. And we were doing all this on a poor little old VAX 11780 with, I think we did bump it up to the maximum 16 megabytes of RAM. It was doing the process information, compiling of process control programs, word processing for the word processing ladies, and running engineering programs for the engineers. So this thing was really being hammered. It reached the point where one of the guys complained to me one day that he put in his password, hit enter, had lunch, then the menu came up. So obviously we needed to upgrade this thing. So Max and I sort of thought about what to do about this. And what we eventually decided on was to buy 2 computers to replace the one. One would be dedicated to the process information, because that was fairly important, and the other one would handle all the rest of it. And we settled on a Microvax 2, which was pretty much the same power as the VAX 780, dedicated to the process of information. Sorry, I got hiccups. And the 8350 would handle everything else. And because this was newer technology, we needed to get Ethernet to get access to all this. And Ethernet at that time was still in fairly early stages, so 10 megabit Ethernet was what you had, running via thick wire coaxial cable with vampire taps. And the next level was thin wire Ethernet, which was again coaxial cable with this time T connectors. UTP and twisted pair Ethernet did not exist. So this was all going to work out fairly expensive. Max and I costed it out, and it was going to be costing $600,000, which is hard to believe nowadays, but at the time that's what the price was. So Max and I thought, well, we better take this off-site to do a full-on presentation to the leadership team. And so we went to a conference room in a motel, and all the heavies showed up, and we did our presentation and justified all the bits and pieces and why we needed to have $600,000. And they looked at one another and said, you can't make it cost more, can you? And Max and I looked at one another and said, what? And they explained that the company globally had this concept of small capital projects and large capital projects. And they seemed to have this idea that there was a good balance to be had between these two sizes of, or categories of projects. And Australia was a bit heavy on the small capital projects and needed more large capital projects. So we asked, well, where's the dividing line? They said, well, anything less than $2 million is a small capital project. And we said, well, we can't responsibly make it cost that much. They said, oh, okay, fair enough. So we got our $600,000 and did our upgrade. But that was an eye-opener. But yeah, so Max and I had a strained relationship at times. He was forever after me to label things in the computer room. And my standard response always was, if you don't know what it is, don't touch it. He wasn't satisfied with that answer. So he was forever badgering me. And he came in one day, and there were A4 pieces of paper printed out with table, wall, chair, computer, air conditioning. He didn't like that much, but he had to laugh. Yeah, so I'm not exactly a yes man. But another time, he came into my office and said, I want you to write down your wisdom about what happens in that computer room. What do you mean? He said, well, you do all these things that run that computer really well, or those computers really well. I want you to write that down in a manual so I can give that to a trained monkey overseas so that they can run their computers the same. This gives you an idea of Max's attitude to other people, referring to our colleagues as trained monkeys. Anyway, I said, well, you see that bookshelf over there with 27 feet of grey manuals? That is the set of manuals for what goes on in that computer room. He looked at it and said, no. I want a single A4 folder that I can hand to somebody and have them do what you do. And I thought, oh God, how am I going to get out of this? So I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and one day, inspiration hit. I went into Max's office, and I wrote up on his whiteboard, data, information, knowledge, wisdom. He looked at me and said, what you going to talk about? I said, okay. To get from data to information, what you need is rules. They give the data structure, so it's not just a string of numbers or bits anymore. It's actually something like temperatures or days of the week or whatever. So it's some sort of structure imposed on it to turn into information. I can write down the rules. To get from information to knowledge, you need logic. That allows you to derive information from, derive knowledge from the information you have. I can write down logic. The transformation from knowledge to wisdom is experience. I said, I can't write down experience. So he looked at me, he looked at the board, he looked at me, he looked at the board. You bastard Baker, you win. Henceforth known as Baker's Law. I have many other stories from my time at that particular company, but that was probably the best of them. We'll see how desperate I get for content some other time. But for now, I'll upload what I've got.